I'm Spencer Mazyck, and joining me now is Mark Gerstein. He is the global chair of the M&A practice at Latham Watkins, who, along with his team, advised advertising giant Omnicom on its recent merger with Paris-based Publicis Groupe. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us today.
Nice to be here with you in the dog days of summer.
So let's get right to the deal, though, because after all, this is the deal of the decade for the ad industry. So what are the terms of this mega merger between these two powerhouse ad companies?
Well, this is a true merger of equals. These companies came back together with relatively equal capitalization. The board is structured 50-50, and you have a good plan for transition succession with co-CEOs for 30 months, and then John Wren taking over CEO going forward. So very well balanced from a capital markets perspective, operational perspective, and governance perspective.
Well, so the shareholders then from each company will receive they'll own roughly 50% of the new entity. But are the Omnicom stockholders, are they forced to give up just a little bit more of their, in order to receive their portion of the combined company?
There's a bit of a premium. In a deal this big, it's hard to call anything rounding error, but there's a touch of a premium there, and that does drive some aspects of the transaction and the structure.
So you mentioned that this is a merger of equals, it's an all-stock deal. Does that make this more challenging or less challenging than some of your typical deals?
It's a great question. It is much more challenging, particularly on a cross-border basis. We're dealing here really with the regulatory regimes in the Netherlands, where the joint company will be formed, France and the US. And those regulatory regimes from a corporate governance perspective, from a capital markets perspective, don't necessarily neatly line up. And so reconciling those regimes in order to put together really a truly global company from a capital markets perspective was quite difficult. This is a company that wants to be listed on the New York and the Euronext Paris. They don't want to do this as a foreign private issuer. They want to be a full registrant on those exchanges. They want to be included in the S&P 500 and the CAC 40, which has never been done before.
Okay. So this is the first time for that. So does it also mean, though, that there are fewer things for you to consider, such as post-closing adjustment and or indemnity?
Public company deals are much easier in that regard. In transactions like this, it is really getting to the finish line that is the biggest challenge, but also making sure you structure governance arrangements that will allow the company to succeed and grow without conflict.
And you mentioned just a while ago that it's going to be incorporated in the Netherlands. Why?
Netherlands has a very flexible governance regime, and John Wren and Maurice Levy put together a very thoughtful program as co-CEOs, board and committee structure, and ultimately transition and succession. And the Dutch legal regime really presented by and far the most flexible flexible legal regime to put those arrangements in place. Also, I think from just a more political perspective, it's viewed as a fairly neutral regime from Europe. A number of French companies have migrated to the Netherlands, and that's been really viewed as politically acceptable.
So, Mark, do you think we're going to see more companies beginning to incorporate in the Netherlands?
I think you will over time. You are seeing a number of companies move offshore for different reasons. Some of those have been tax, some are strategic like ours. And the Netherlands, I think, is really emerging as the Delaware of the European continent, if you will.
The Delaware of the European continent, I like that. But so is the operational headquarters, though, having it still located in Paris and New York, is that a real way to preserve jobs here?
It's not so much to preserve jobs, it's to provide leadership in both places. I think you'll find John spending a fair amount of time in Paris and Maurice spending a fair amount of time in the United States. These companies are unusual in that they're really a collection of hundreds of agencies who not only work under this umbrella, but they compete against each other for the same business.
It's a network, really.
It's a network. And so it's much more easy to manage these networks from both locations than you might think a top-down managed industrial company, for example.
Well, I want to talk about the reasons for this particular deal, because aside from getting a leg up on the competition, namely the market leader WPP, why else did these two companies decide to merge?
Well, I'm not sure there's anything wrong with simply getting a leg up on WPP. You know, this was really a vision of John and Maurice's, which they spent a fair amount of time putting together and creating, to create a really global, best-in-class company for not only for stockholders, but for clients and employees. They looked at the emergence and growth of the big data. They looked at the continued desire of clients to find new and novel solutions and creative solutions. And they looked at their respective portfolios, which are going to together have 7 of the top 10 most awarded network agencies, or agency networks, 7 of 15 top creative agencies, and thought putting that group together would create really an environment for even greater creativity and success. I also think they believe that by creating a single company from a capital markets perspective, they create both a currency and an incentive compensation mechanism that will be best in class. And then finally, I think that the prospect and the challenge of putting together 130,000 employees in these networks appealed to both of them.
Yeah, that is a challenge. It sounds like it might be. Well, but let me ask you this, though. This type of consolidation, though, seems to have been a trend in the ad industry for several years now. Any particular reason why?
Well, I think the creation of ad networks and the ability to take agencies into umbrellas is driven both by the desire to have capital markets currency, stock to incentivize people. And all these agents, none of these agents on their own is really big enough to be a large cap currency. So there's some capital markets benefit to bringing these agencies in, both from an incentive compensation perspective, but also be able to let people retire and provide them with a retirement fund. I think from an operational perspective, there are a fair amount of benefits in sharing services, reducing costs. And then finally, the breadth of platforms that clients want to see their product sold on and advertised on and distributed on is extraordinary. It ranges from Facebook to your 30-second spot on CBS. And to create a platform that not only has the agencies that can do that and the media groups that can buy that product, but also a platform that provides an integrated solution to those concerns and questions, has been probably the most significant driver, I expect, of the consolidation of the industry.
And so you're talking about clients and their needs. So what does this mega merger, though, mean for clients like AT&T and Verizon, or even Coca-Cola and Pepsi? Because now they're going to be advertised, they're going to be repped by the same advertising company.
Well, they're under the same umbrella, but they're really not being repped by the same companies. Over the years, as these amalgamations have occurred of the different agencies, they have created firewalls and other protections so that a client is comfortable that with an Omnicom, two competitors, for example, can be in two different agencies, and they have no concerns that their plans, their knowledge, the creativity created for them will be shared across those boundaries. So putting these two bigger groups together shouldn't change that dynamic.
So even though there are networks of agencies, they're still competing against one another, and they're not sharing information with each other.
Look, within Omnicom and Publicis today, these agencies compete against each other for business.
So do you have any concerns, though, about any antitrust issues with, say, either the U.S. or EU regulators?
You know, I think the early press has gotten this one wrong. This is a highly fragmented business. Ease of entry, barriers to entry are very low. Any four people can walk out of a shop and pick up Nike one day with the right idea. So from a competitive perspective, we don't think this creates any challenges for the client side. On the media side, the groups that are being put together are facing enormous giants on the other side. Google's, Facebook's, large network conglomerates, who frankly will have more pricing power than this combined Omnicom Group will have.
So Mark, as you know, though, some experts have said that the power of this merged firm will actually allow it to influence an entire industry. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure what they mean by influence. Again, these are really hundreds of separate companies. At the top, they're there to share best practices. They're to create a strong capital market product and manage these groups effectively. But day to day for clients and for customers and employees, these will continue to be autonomous operated agencies on both sides and under the umbrella. With respect to the U.S. antitrust review, do you have a sense yet of which agency might actually conduct it? We do not yet. Okay, that's still to come then. So can you tell us, though, how did Latham Watkins come to represent Omnicom, and how long, in fact, have you been representing the advertising company? This has been a long-standing representation for the firm and my colleagues, relatively new to me. They started with us in 2005 with initially some complex litigation. That grew into really global work on everything from employee benefits, litigation to corporate matters. And then in recent years, we've grown to handle their corporate governance and their corporate securities work. But you have to earn every mandate these days. I wish I could tell you clients just come in and hand you the next one.
No, but that doesn't happen.
That's not how the environment works. So we went in and presented for the work. And I think what appealed to John, Ren, Mike O'Brien, as we presented our capabilities, was this integrated platform of best-in-class services. A transaction like this touches antitrust, tax, capital markets, M&A, employee benefits. And to have best-in-class capabilities in every country is very unusual. You have a lot of firms with tremendous global networks, but you couldn't say those firms are best in class in M&A and corporate finance, for example. Similarly, you have boutiques that are outstanding in their own market in a particular area like M&A or corporate finance. The combination of breadth and best in class is really unusual, and I think that's what was very persuasive and appealing to the folks in Omnicom when we presented our capabilities.
So you're saying that Latham won it basically because of how unique the firm is and the services that it offers?
Antitrust to tax, M&A to securities. I think it's been appealing. The Watson situation, I'm sure it was appealing to the folks at Activists when they went after Warner Chilcott. It was certainly appealing to the client here, and we continue to see growth in our cross-border practice.
So what does this transaction say, if anything, really about the current state of global M&A activity as we prepare for the fourth quarter?
It's a really good question. We've had some bright spots so far this year: energy, mining, utilities. There have been some great consumer deals. The balance of the transactions, setting aside private equity for a minute, have really come to bear where there's a compelling justification, and management and the board believe that it will be received well by the capital markets. The activist community, institutional investors, no longer take a merger on face value. You've seen that in a number of situations. And so I think we'll continue to see through the rest of the year, certainly on the larger transactions, only those most compelling rationale.
Okay.
Private equity has been an unusual year. You've had a couple big deals, Heinz and Dell, but those really aren't traditional private equity transactions. And if you pull those out, value is down and number of transactions is down. I really can't point to any one reason for that, but we're also hopeful that will pick up towards the end of the year.
So you think it's going to be a better end of the year than beginning?
Third quarter certainly looked better than second, and second picked up a bit over first, depending on the sector. But again, it's going to depend not so much on broad secular trends as the particular deals coming to the fore at the right time with the right value proposition.
Well, and this mega merger certainly did help. So thanks so much, though, for joining us today to talk about it.
Pleasure seeing you.
For more information on this or other topics, subscribe to BloombergLaw.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody.